Greetings and happy Monday. I'm out and about in beautiful downtown San Mateo at our Central Park, and it seemed like a good place to pause and share some Scrum thinking with you on this Monday morning. So today's topic is, when should we change Scrum? One of the things that I get asked fairly often is people come to me and say, well, Chris, the Scrum stuff sounds good, we want to be agile, but Scrum, we can't do Scrum exactly here, so we're going to do a modified Scrum or a hybrid Scrum. Or I hear people say, well, we've been trying Scrum for a couple of weeks, but it's not working, we're gonna change it. Is that a good idea? Well, maybe. One of the things I'll start with is, I think everybody modifies Scrum. Pretty much everybody, every company that I work with, every team that I work with is doing Scrum, probably not exactly by the book. And in some cases, that's super awesome and the best thing. And in some cases, it's less than super awesome and maybe not exactly the best thing. So I want to kind of think about, when does it make sense to modify Scrum? When would it maybe be better to try to do Scrum, quote unquote, by the book? So the first thing to think about is, how far along are you in your Scrum journey? If you're brand new to Scrum, your team's brand new to Scrum, we don't have any experience with it, well, then if you're tweaking and modifying and changing it, you're kind of doing that from a place of very little knowledge, right? Maybe we read a book, but we don't have any real experience with it yet. And my initial advice would be, try it by the book for a while. There's a reason that the various parts of Scrum are there, and maybe a good place to start is to see, well, how does it actually work here? And remember that at first, right, your first 3 to 6 sprints, you're definitely in the learning curve. You're definitely in that time where you're spending a lot of time trying to figure out, how do we do Scrum and all of that. So I would say, be there in that learning curve. Spend time there. Don't rush to change it. And then once you feel like, okay, we understand what Scrum is, we understand how Scrum works here, we understand how to do Scrum here, then if you feel like, oh, here's a tweak or a modification that we think would make it even better, okay, well, awesome, great. You're coming from a place of having some experience, having some knowledge, and all of that. My next thought about changing Scrum is, I think the basic feedback loops in Scrum are pretty solid. So in general, I would say, try to keep the basic fundamental feedback loops in there, right? We've got a feedback loop that starts at sprint planning and goes to sprint review, where we make a plan for how are we going to evolve the product this sprint, right? What are the things we think would add the most value? And we create a plan that we think will allow us to do that. And then at the end, we close the feedback loop and figure out, how well did that work? Were we actually able to implement on that? And also get the feedback from our stakeholders. We've built the thing that we said we'd build, and our stakeholders get to now see it, interact with it, and figure out, is that what they really needed, right? Maybe what they thought they needed, is it what they really need? Or does that product increment that we just created really lead them to realize that, we actually need something a little bit different? So I think that feedback loop is important. There's a daily feedback loop with the development team, where every daily Scrum, we're syncing up and trying to figure out, knowing what we know right now, what's the most important work, and who's going to do that work. And then we close that loop every day, right? Did we do that most important work? And how is our notion of what the most important work changed? I think that feedback loop is pretty important. And then, of course, there's the team improvement feedback loop that goes retrospective to retrospective. Every sprint, we're making a plan for how do we improve as a team, and then we close that feedback loop at the next retrospective. We say, did we actually implement our improvement plan? And very importantly, did it lead to improvement? Right? Not all improvement ideas are going to work out. Some of them seem like a good idea at the time, but didn't quite work out, so let's let that one go, try something different. So I think keeping those feedback loops intact is important. Another thought about changing Scrum is very often when I talk to people and they think, oh, in our environment we need to change Scrum. It's actually because Scrum is making some fundamental problem in their environment very visible, right? They're feeling this pain of this fundamental problem because it's hard to do Scrum here. And very often the right answer is, well, don't change Scrum to fit your dysfunction. Change your dysfunction so that you can do Scrum. I've seen places where they're like, well, 1 week sprints or 2 week sprints or even 4 week sprints. Oh, that's way too short, right? We do big things here. Well, maybe you want to learn how to chop those big things into smaller things so you can get these feedback loops, right? Because there's kind of an inherent dysfunction in the development group basically going dark for long periods of time where the stakeholders have no input. And in fact, even the development group doesn't have any feedback about, are we actually building the right thing? Are we actually building it the right way? Do we have good reason to believe that we're going to deliver on any time commitments and such that we've made? I've also seen teams that are like, we're going to modify Scrum by taking out that retrospective. It's really inefficient. That'll give us another hour every week that the team can code. And my thought is very often, the fact that you think you need that extra hour is itself a dysfunction, right? If you'd invest that hour in figuring out how could we be more efficient, suddenly maybe we wouldn't be so stressed about needing more hours, right? Because we're finding ways to use the hours more effectively through the retrospective process. So, a few thoughts. Should we modify Scrum? Well, honestly, at the end of the day, you're going to end up modifying Scrum. Everybody does. It's really just this basic framework that helps you figure out how to best do your work. So, yeah, you're gonna tweak it and adjust it. Early on, I would caution against it. I would say early on, try to do it as by the book as you can. Also, early on, I would say do really short sprints, like 1 week. And when you feel like, Scrum doesn't fit here because, really take a hard look and see if whatever comes after the because is actually a fundamental problem or limit or dysfunction in your organization, and if maybe you wouldn't be better served by addressing that so that you actually could do Scrum as designed. So those are some thoughts. Hopefully they're helpful. If you would like to dive in and learn more, maybe you want to take a Certified Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner, or our fancy schmancy new Advanced Certified Scrum Product Owner Workshop, go over to agilelearninglabs.com. We would be happy to see you in an upcoming workshop. And have a great week, and thanks for hanging out with me here in the park in San Mateo.